Thank you. Hello. Sorry, I just cracked a fresh beer, so I need to take that first sip. One sec. So as Wade said, I am Aaron. I'm a Natural Environment Program Officer for the Victorian Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning. God, that's a mouthful. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, and I am so excited to be here tonight. It's been so long since we've been in this room doing this. It is so fun. Thank you. And it's the last Nerd Night of the year. It's Wade and Doris's last Nerd Night. Can we give them another round of applause? They do such a good job. I think Wade's blushing. So before I get started, I just have to caveat. Although I do work for the state government, I am not here tonight as a representative of the government. I'm here tonight as an individual. So that just means if I swear, for instance, it's not the state of Victoria saying fuck. It's just me. So let's get into it. Where is this clicker? I am not Dan Andrews. So the big question is, what the hell is a plains wanderer? Raise your hand if you had never heard of a plains wanderer before this. Okay, now that's a lot of you. Raise your hand if you had heard of a plains wanderer before this. Cool. Now raise your hand if you didn't just raise your hand then. Bartender? All right, I just got to make sure. So a plains wanderer is adorable, I know. A plains wanderer is a native bird. They're only about sort of 15 centimetres tall. They are critically endangered according to the FFG Act, which is Victorian legislation, and they're critically endangered according to the EPBC Act, which is Commonwealth legislation. So that just means they're about as endangered as you can get. They have this adorable sort of marbled feathering, quite cute yellow legs that look like they're wearing Wellingtons. And the best quality is this permanent, what the hell is going on expression on their faces. They are widely considered by ornithologists to be technically super weird. And this is for a number of reasons. The first one is this is a laser pointer. The first one is the female actually has the coloured feathering. She has this quite fabulous checkered neck scarf and this very ritzy red cravat, while the male is kind of boring. He's in his trackies, he's got an old t-shirt on, he's really not going out for anyone. The other cool thing about plains wanderers is that the female is actually the one that does the calling. She lets out this sultry, ooh, ooh. All right, I can do it. It's ooh, ooh. All right, you do it, come on. It's really easy. It's just ooh, ooh. That was good, that was hot. You're lucky there's no male plains wanderers in the room right now. So the female calls, the male comes running, the Stevie Nicks plays, they do their thing, the female lays the eggs and then buggers off. And then the male is actually the one that sits on the eggs and raises the chicks. So each clutch has 3 to 5 adorable chicks. It gets better. After they've hatched, they then sit underneath their stay-at-home dad for a couple of weeks, and then they go off to fend for themselves. Meanwhile, the female plains wanderer goes and mates with another male. And yeah, that's right. And best we can tell, female plains wanderers mate with up to 3 males per year, leaving the males to do all the parenting and making plains wanderers the feminist icons of the bird world. Yeah, that's it. Ladies taking it for themselves. That's right. So as well as being kind of cool biologically, they are also really cool from a genetic and evolutionary perspective. So they're in a genus all on their own, which is Pedionomus, and they're in a family all on their own, which is Pedionomidae. Now, if you're not into taxonomy, what this means is that they have no living relatives. And in fact, the closest living relative is a seed snipe, which is in a completely different suborder. Seed snipe, this guy here. And by the way, seed snipe, who would name a bird a seed snipe? It sounds like what you'd call a snitch in bird prison. But here's the catch. A seed snipe is actually native to the Andean and Patagonian regions in South America. So this means that plains wanderers are the sole surviving species in a genetic line dating back to when Australia was connected to South America through Antarctica 100 million years ago. If you're wowing, that's right. If you're not wowing, I'm going to explain that again. They are the... There should have been more wows. They are the sole surviving species in a genetic line dating back more than 100 million years. Thank you. This is a big deal. This is like having the last barbecue shape in the sole surviving packet of barbecue shapes. By our best guess, there's less than 1,000 left in the wild. So based on this, the London Zoological Society ranked plains wanderers number 1 in the world for evolutionary distinctness and conservation importance. That's enough. So they used to be found all across central and sort of central eastern Australia. This map's by the Commonwealth Government. They actually did something right. Their former range is the pink, the light pink. So it used to be South Australia, Northern Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, into Northern Territory. Their current range is the dark pink. So mostly Northern Victoria, small populations in South Australia, Southern New South Wales and Queensland. Now they have this really specific habitat requirement, which is these open native grasslands. So native grasses with no weeds, and the grasses can't be more than 30 centimetres tall. Now, this probably sounds really specific, like who's out there measuring it, but it actually serves a really practical reason, which is so that plains wanderers can see predators coming. If they see something, I'm not joking, if they see something coming, they stand on their little tippy toes and like peer over the grass. This is Cam, by the way. Peer over the grass and they see if a predator's coming. It's so cute. Native grasses, 30 centimetres tall. And the other thing is there can't be any trees in the sort of general vicinity because, once again, practical, trees can be roosts for predatory birds. So you're probably thinking, this all sounds really specific and quite a lot of work. And yeah, it is. Plains wanderers are really hard to conserve, but it's kind of what makes them really great as well, because they're an indicator species. So judging by the plains wanderer population, we can then assess the health of the grasslands. So if the plains wanderer population drops a bit, we know something's not right in the grasslands. If the plains wanderer population is going up, then we know we're managing it correctly. So as I said, specific habitat requirement, this beautiful grassland in Tamara Gilgai. How nice does that look? Very nice. So they pretty much just spend all their time in these grasses, foraging around and nesting, eating seeds and berries from native grasses and forbs, insects, creepy crawlies, pretty much whatever they can get their little beaks on out there. And the thing is, Victoria actually used to be covered in a patchwork of these native grasslands. So this is a map that DELWP modelled of all the ecological vegetation classes in Victoria before 1750. So sort of before colonisation. Just to explain these colours to you here. So this is forest and woodland, the green. The blue is either wetland or riverine. What else we got? The red is sort of heath. All this up in the top corner is mallee and desert. And the brown is all grassland. Look at that. So much of Victoria used to be native grassland. So keep your eye on that brown, and it's gone. This is modelling from 2005, and 99% of the native grassland is gone. There are smatterings of it sort of here and there, and the biggest patch is in the Northern Plains, where we do most of our work. So any guesses what happened to all the native grassland? Precisely, us. We happened. We built our houses on it. We paved our roads on it. And mostly we turned it into farmland. So probably no surprise here, but we made some really bad decisions during colonisation. I know, hot take, am I right? Really bad decisions. And one of them was to take this really beautiful native grassland, which we now know is really good for cows and sheep, and replace it with what we used to feed cows and sheep back in Europe, which is pretty good for the animals, but really bad for the soil / just everything else. The other thing we did / are still doing is a process called cropping. Now, if you've never heard of cropping before, this is what it looks like. Essentially, you take a grassland, you burn it to a crisp, and then you plant one crop, pretty much only ever one crop. It's a cereal, usually corn, wheat, barley, or oats. Harvest it, and then burn it again. And you do that over and over, and it just sucks everything out of the soil. And by our best guess, it takes at least 15 years for a grassland to recover from this process. Now, you're probably thinking, this guy works for the government. He's really critical of farming. And I am critical in some ways, but I'm not anti-farmers and I'm not anti-food. In fact, some of my closest friends are food. What I'm critical of is farming that's not considered. And in fact, we work with some really good farmers up north who manage to take land and turn it into something really productive, but also create what we would call perfect habitat. The real problem is these enormous farming, like agriculture corporations and investment corporations who buy up huge tracts of land and just suck it dry. That's where a lot of the good grassland is going. It sucks. We're trying to stop it by offering incentives to farmers and putting planting overlays on existing grasslands, but it's really hard, and we've already lost so much. The other thing that's happening to plains wanderers, I've just put up a bit of a bummer warning, so look away if you don't want to be bummed out. The other thing that's happening to plains wanderers are predators. Introduced ground-based predators such as cats and foxes. Now, cats and foxes are a problem for any bird, obviously, but I'll take this away now. Once again, plains wanderers are a little special. So their marbled feathering that I mentioned before gives them excellent camouflage. In fact, they're almost impossible to see during the day. I personally have almost stepped right on a plains wanderer because I just didn't see it. And so almost knowing this, their defense tactic seems to be something along the lines of, if I stay perfectly still, they can't see me. And it actually is so true. You could walk right up to a plains wanderer and look them right in the eye and they just stay perfectly still. It's so dumb and cute. And it makes our job really easy because we just sort of like walk up and pick them up and put bands on them and put radio trackers on them and do all of our research. The problem is it also makes them really easy targets for anything that's not a scientist. So pretty much we know they're being eaten. The problem is what specifically is eating them, how often is this happening, what kind of effect is this happening, is this putting on the population? We actually don't know. We only just recently figured out that they were being eaten. And so, yeah, it's a real problem. Okay, so here's the situation in summary. There's this critically endangered bird. Its habitat has been reduced by more than 99%. It has no living relatives, and everything that can eat it is eating it. Fuck. What do you do? Well, in science, like in any good, board game, you try and figure out what you're working with. And so for us, that means monitoring. How many plains wanderers are left? Where are they located? And what are their preferred habitat requirements? The other thing you do in science is have a backup plan. And so Werribee Open Range Zoo has started a captive breeding program, essentially as a fail-safe in case something happens to the wild population. So monitoring for us essentially just looks like going out and counting all the plains wanderers out there. The problem is plains wanderers are really hard to see during the day. As I just mentioned, you can sort of almost step on them. I'll show you that picture again. Where is the... Hey. They're really hard to see during the day. The camouflage makes them almost impossible to see. Now, you're probably thinking, camouflage, smamouflage, I can spot a bird in the grass. What are you talking about, Aaron? Well, no, they're actually really difficult. And in fact, farmers who work out on the grasslands all day long, who you could sort of say have a bit of an eye for it, have actually managed to drive over them with their tractors. That was meant to be a joke. I'm reading the mood of the room now. It's very awe, isn't it? So if you can't see them during the day, what do? We go out at night. Now, this is pretty simple. We just attach spotlights to both sides of a ute and just drive through the paddocks all night long trying to find plains wanderers. It's a little bit more scientific than that. We actually drive GPS cached transects, which are standardized lines through a paddock, a standard distance apart, just so we get the most coverage and so that we can replicate it the following year. And we just write down everything that we see. So we see stubble quails, we see brown quails, we see songlarks. Occasionally, if we're lucky, we see the most vicious animal in the plains, which is the fat-tailed dunnart, seen here viciously attacking a parks science officer. And very, very occasionally, we see a plains wanderer. Oh. The problem is that plains wanderers aren't actually that much easier to see at night than they are during the day. Here's a photo from a plains wanderer during spotlighting. I'm not sure if you can make it out, but there is actually a plains wanderer in that photo, I promise. So they're really hard to see, and we've been nocturnal monitoring now for 11 years, and the results have been messy. The R value is not great, and none of it is statistically significant enough to tell us if there's actually a trend in the plains wanderer population. Is it going up? Is it going down? We don't know. So what's the problem here? Is the population actually this mobile? Do they disappear and then come back and disappear and come back? Or is it just that plains wanderers are really hard to see? The answer, it turns out, is actually in thermal cameras. So if you've never heard of a thermal camera before, it's a camera, but it picks up infrared light instead of visual light. And so it shows us anything that's hot, which means it's alive. And so, similar situation, we strap cameras to the side of the ute. A little feed comes into a couple of monitors on the dashboard, and we drive around. Suddenly, instead of getting a little bit seasick from staring into a torch beam all night, we're getting this really clear picture that something is out there. And all we need to do is get out of the car and go and see what it is. It's been fantastic. And replicating these spotlighting surveys, so running the same transects in the same paddock but a day apart, we encountered 6 times the amount of plains wanderers as we did with a spotlight. And we could see them from a greater distance, so we could see them from 30 metres instead of just 10. So needless to say, we're switching all of our monitoring to thermal cameras now. But there's a problem, because how do you consolidate the two sets of data? How do you run from spotlighting into thermal? Because the data would just show a 6-fold increase in plains wanderers. So how do you do it? We don't know. We really don't know. We're trying to figure that out at the moment. And it's hard because you don't want to throw away 11 years of monitoring data, but also the two data don't quite add up. So we're working on that. Now, the thing about nocturnal monitoring and thermal monitoring is that you kind of need to know where the plains wanderers are before you go out. Otherwise, you're just driving around paddocks all night long. So the solution to that is a song meter. Now, these are pretty simple. It's just essentially a sort of like sound recorder with a couple of microphones on a stick. And we've got 66 of them out in the Northern Plains. Now, they turn on once in the morning and once in the evening, times when we know plains wanderers call the most. They turn on, record for a few minutes, and then turn off. They have a 6-month battery life and 6-month data storage. And so pretty much we just go out, turn it on, collect the data, and put it out for another 6 months. Now, each song meter after 6 months gives us around 300 to 400 sound recordings, which is a lot of data to listen to. So we use a recognizer algorithm. We run all the sound recordings through the algorithm, and it spits out sonograms, which essentially, this is what a plains wanderer call looks like in a sonogram. Do it for me again. I can see it now. Exactly. So that's what it looks like. And so the recognizer has a pretty good sense that that's a plains wanderer call. It then spits out all of the, like sound events, you could call them, and says, yes, it's a plains wanderer, or no, it's something else. We then sit down with an amazing team of volunteers and listen to all the positive matches and say, yes, that's a plains wanderer, or no, it's something else. A lot of the time it's just wind. Now and then it's a sheep. Occasionally it's a magpie tearing a song meter apart, which is always fun to listen to. And if we're lucky, it's this. Did you hear that? Yeah, it's very satisfying. So we then aggregate all of those yeses, all of those actual songs, and we put them into a spreadsheet, which we then aggregate against the maps or the locations of the song meters, which essentially gives us a sense of occupation of plains wanderers across the entire plains. Now, it doesn't give us how many plains wanderers there are, whether they're male or female, if it's a family or what have you, but at least it tells us that they're there. And so then using that data, we go out and either do nocturnal monitoring, or we might even tag it for a release of captive bred birds. So you might be thinking, wow, Aaron, that sounds like a lot of monitoring. And it is, but the thing is we're getting different kinds of data from this. So the song meters are giving us occupation. They tell us if there's a plains wanderer there. And then the nocturnal monitoring gives us abundance, so how many plains wanderers are there. And from that, we get a pretty good sense now of what's going on with the population. Now, as I mentioned before, you have to have a backup plan, and so Werribee Open Range Zoo started a captive breeding program, starting with Wanda here, who in 2019 turned up in someone's backyard in Bendigo, and has since become the matriarch of the breeding program. Now, I won't talk about this too much because it's not my field. I don't want to take credit for someone else's work. And also, some of the information is actually a little confidential. But suffice to say, it's been fantastic. It's been a huge boon for our knowledge of plains wanderers. And this is simply because we can now watch plains wanderers 24 hours a day like the absolute creeps that we are. And we've learnt so much about them. We've learnt about their interactions, their behaviour, their calling, their eating, their breeding. It's been fantastic. The zookeepers have tagged some really funny dance moves that the birds use to communicate to each other. Some favourites are aeroplaning, which is as dumb as it looks. They sort of like pretend they're an aeroplane and like zoom around. And then there's also the ever ominous night wing. And then something else we've gotten from the captive breeding report, which I had to share, was plains wanderer sperm. Just cause. It's been really good. I won't talk too much about this though, because as I said, it's not my field. If you want to learn more, please look at the captive breeding report by Yvette Paulig. It's available through ResearchGate. It is the best thing you'll read this year. One thing I can say, though, is that the captive breeding program has been such a success. It turns out that plains wanderers love to breed, that we've actually been able to release captive bred birds into the wild. We've had 2 releases this year, and it's been really nice. Now, we couldn't have done this all by ourselves. We have some amazing partners that we work with. The CMA, Parks Victoria, Trust for Nature, who, if you haven't heard of, do an amazing job. We work with the traditional owners in the Northern Plains, which are Yorta Yorta, Barappa Barappa, Wamba Wamba, and Jar Jar Wurrung. It's quite cool. DELWP have this policy where before you do anything, you have to speak to the custodian of the land first and ask them how they would do it and what they think. So that's really special. We also work with some researchers and some amazing volunteers, too many to list tonight. So what's next? Well, the thing is, this isn't part of a PhD or a research project. This is a day in, day out battle to save a threatened species. Thankfully, in 2017, the department released a strategy called Biodiversity 2037, which sets out a number of goals, and one of them is to not lose any more endangered species. The other one is to try and achieve a net gain in the overall extent of our current endangered species, and so that's what we're doing. And we may never be done. We may never bring plains wanderers back, but if we can improve the situation for them a little bit and maybe give them a bit more habitat, we'll know we're doing a good job. Now, if you love plains wanderers as much as I do after tonight, there are a few things you can do to help. Write a letter to the minister. So Lily D'Ambrosio is the Minister of the Environment. She actually does an awesome job, I should say. But if you send her a letter saying plains wanderers are cute, she technically has to respond. You can buy a cute tote bag. So the zoo are running a program at the moment called Totes for Wildlife, where proceeds from the sale of these adorable bags go to plains wanderer protection. You can donate to Trust for Nature. You can just buy sustainably grown grains. Just protect their habitat a little bit. It's pretty easy to do. Or if you've been admiring this flash little badge I've got here, Bridget Farmer is a printmaker up in that sort of region. And she makes these adorable pins. And some proceeds from the sale of the pins goes to Plains Wanderer Protection. So Christmas is around the corner. Buy his family some pins. Now, I told Bridget I was doing this tonight, and she said, Aaron, that's awesome. Do you want some pins? So she gave me a big old bag of pins.
Just a few. Just a few. Just a handful.
And so I'm just going to leave them on the front of the stage after my talk. Feel free to grab one. And then tell your friends and family about Plains Wanderers.
Put your hands together for Aaron.
Yeah, no, I was really getting into that. What's about it?
Keep the microphone in your hand. Aaron's a little bit over time, but when he said some of this information is confidential, I was like, keep talking. We're going to be very quick because you are a little over time. A couple questions from the audience. Can we do a bit more house lights? Because I can't really see you right there. I haven't heard you before.
Yeah, just wondering, with this song Laters, like, you don't pick up individual, you just pick up that it's a plain wanderer.
That's
You're
right.
not hearing individual birds, you're hearing a field.
Sort of, yeah. We hear a call, and we just know that somewhere within that song meter, we've tested it, it's about 180 metre range. Somewhere within 180 metres of that song meter is a Plains Wanderer. We don't know which one, we don't know how many, but it tells us that they're there.
Next question, yep. What do they taste like? Answer's chicken. You watch yourself. Yes, go for it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Can we
The question is...
triangulate the location of the Plains Wanderer from song meters? We just don't have enough money to have that many song meters, unfortunately.
Donate money.
Yeah.
Donate money.
We've got 66, and we're just putting them as best as we can. So, but it's a good question.
A question from a woman, please. Yep.
With your data collecting, is it possible to simultaneously do the demo imaging and the spotlighting imaging and figuring out what the error value is, and then times that error?
Can you do both these type of mappings, figure out what the error value is, and then figure out where the birds are?
No, because I only have one hand, and it's on a mount, and I kind of have to do this, and so I can't operate a spotlight at the same time.
So we need more money, again, for more people to be doing more work, right?
No, it's a good question. You really want that accuracy, but we just can't do it. So we go out one night after, but the birds don't move that much in theory.
Back, very far over here. Yep. How much of your work is just about this bird? What a great succinct question.
You know what? I would love to say I spend all day with these birds, but this represents maybe 20% of my workload. I do a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Okay, question?
Yes.
What's the difference in the state of Commonwealth?
Question. Finally, a policy question. So EPBC legislation is Commonwealth, and so it looks at the whole of Australia and says how many of these animals are there, or plants, and what's their habitat distribution. So if there's quite a lot in Australia, then it won't make the EPBC. But whereas Victoria is what's the population and distribution just in Victoria. So there could be a lot of birds in Australia, but not in Victoria. And so it could be endangered in Victoria, but not Australia. Because there are only maybe 1,000 Plains Wanderers in the wild, it's critically endangered by both.
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
Doesn't matter where.
No.
Okay.
South America, Gondwanaland, you name it.
We've got two more questions real quick. Yep. How much area is required to sustain a viable population?
I love these questions. That's a good one. So we sort of generally give them about a paddock, which on the Northern Plains, they're pretty big properties, so it's about 10,000 hectares for one couple of Plains Wanderers.
Can I, second question, what kind of grass do they like?
Oh man, they love tussocks and wallaby grasses. A lot of those seeds.
Kangaroo grass?
Kangaroo grass is not so much up there, but they do like salt butchers, so Atriplex, which has these really tasty little berries.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Final question in the center there.
Yes. Well, you may
Does
have
everyone hear
noticed,
that one? What was the question?
how far do they wander? And that map that we had up there, we know for a fact that genetically, that's one population. So we've done genetic testing on birds from Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, and they're genetically indistinguishable. So one in Victoria might be like, I don't like this anymore, and then just go to Queensland.
Put your hands together for Aaron and Grinter. Thank you so much, Aaron. Keep on clapping. We're going to hear it for Nick, who's going to play us some tunes. Grab yourself a drink at the bar, and we'll be back in exactly 10 minutes.